What's going on, you guys? So in today's video I'm going to be doing kind of like a build tip on how to do an at-home alignment. So basically building your own little makeshift alignment rack for about 25 bucks. So as you can see, I've got my car all set up already, and I'm going to kind of walk you through and show you how to set up a system like this and how exactly it works. So for starters, I use conduit tubing because it's really cheap. So you can get like 10-foot sections of that for like $4 at Menards or Home Depot. So get two 10-foot sections of that. You're going to need 4 jack stands, preferably tall ones. If you don't have tall ones, you can always take smaller jack stands and stack blocks of wood underneath them, or cinder blocks. Speaking of cinder blocks, you're gonna go ahead and need 8 cinder blocks. So I got 2 in the front here, so you can see I got 2 in the back there, and then the same thing on the other side. You're also gonna want to get wheel chocks. So I have 2 wheel chocks for the front and rear, and then one of these chalk line reels. So these chalk line reels you can get at Home Depot, Menards. They're $3-4. You just get 2 of those, and you're just using them for the string layout across your tubing. Now, one thing to take into consideration when doing this is you want your dimensions on your tubing cuts to be identical. So on this piece of tube right here, it's 8 feet long exactly. Front and rear dimensions are going to be identical. They do need to be 100% identical. So 8 feet long end to end. And then right here where I have my string loop, you can see I took a saw and kind of cut a little bit of a groove in there. That way the string always snaps right into that little groove and it doesn't want to move around on you. Now I have one of those grooves on each side here for the string, and in between this groove and the groove down there is exactly 7 feet. So 7 feet between here and there, 8 feet end to end. Now that lets us have a good spot for the string to kind of like snap into on both sides. And if we do the back, we know the back's identical, so all we have to do after that is square up the system. Now squaring it up can be a little bit time consuming, but it's really not that hard to do. So if you have a square offset on your vehicle, you're going to want all of these measurements to be identical. If you have a staggered offset, you're going to want the front distance to match left to right and the rear distance to match left to right. Now I will show you exactly what that distance is. Now to measure everything and get it squared up, I use a smaller precision ruler. I also use these for measuring when doing the alignments, and I will show you how to square this up right now. So basically you come in here and you go off of your center cap, find a spot both sides where you're going to measure from. So this one is like pretty much dead nut center here, and we are at 3 28. So what's that, 7/8? So we're at 3 7/8 on this side. So we're going to go ahead and measure the other side now, and this one is at 4 1/8. So we need to go about 1/8 inch over that way. And to do that, we just move this on the jack stand here. All right, we are at exactly 4 inches there. So we overdid it a little bit, by about 1/16 of an inch. So we're going to move that just a little. So we're at about 3 15/16 now. And you just want to keep going back and forth doing this until you get the measurements identical. All right, so we're like spot on now at 4 inches between our center cap and our string on the front. And once you know these numbers of what it's supposed to be, it'll be a lot easier to get it all set up around the second time, because you'll know, because this is a cut groove in here. So you'll know, okay, 4 inches center cap to string. So now we got to go ahead and set up the rear. And we do that the same way. Come back here and measure this. This is 5 5/8. Okay, so we need to go about 1/16 of an inch that way. Now getting these small adjustments is really difficult. Perfect. So what is that? So we are at 5 11/16 on both sides, center cap to string, 4 inches center cap to string on the front. Now, since we did move this rear a little bit Let's go back and double check the front again, and you can get kind of a, you know, a cycle of going around and having to make fine adjustments until you're pretty spot on if you're trying to get it 100% perfect. It's really not too difficult to do though, so it shouldn't take too long. Doing an initial setup on something like this usually only takes about, you know, 10 minutes or so. So we're still at 4 inches right there, and right on 4 inches right there. Now you'll notice on this wheel already, look at how far towed out this is, and you do want to make sure you center your steering wheel and make sure everything is centered ahead of time. And I did center my wheel, so clearly there is just a huge alignment issue on the front of this car. This is way too far towed out. Now there are things called rack stops that if you don't have the inner tie rod end boot on your car, you can actually slide a rack stop in there, and what that does is it slides in between the ball joint on the outer tie rod and the actual inner side, or the ball joint on the inner tie rod on the actual steering shaft, and it actually slides over the steering shaft and it locks itself in place at dead nut center, so you can actually have the rack centered on the car 100%, just in case your wheel might be off a little bit. But I don't have one of those. I marked everything pretty well, so we now we just go ahead and do the alignment like you normally would. Oh, I'm also not sure if I mentioned, I don't think I did, but what I do is I put trash bags underneath the wheels too that I'm going to be adjusting. So the rear doesn't have anything under it right now because I like to work one side at a time, so I'll do the front first and then I'll do the rear. But I put trash bags under there, so while I'm adjusting, it's easier to slide around. You can see how much that moves. That way you're not trying to turn the rubber tire on the concrete blocks, and this actually lets it slip really easily. Makes it a lot easier just to kind of dial the toe in without having to fight it and, you know, worry about moving the blocks around or anything like that. So a couple trash bags, some cinder blocks, some string, jack stand, and some conduit tubing. So the last time I drove this car, it actually didn't feel too terrible on the front end. Like the in-steer and everything felt pretty good. Rear definitely needed more grip, so we're gonna measure that out, see what our toe is. I kind of want to run like about a 1/2 inch total toe in the rear. I don't think it's anywhere near that right now though. On the front end, from previous experience, I know that a 1/2 inch toe out works really good for me. And judging by this, I think we're a little bit off on that. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys how I adjust toe on this, which is basically what this is set up for. It's set up for adjusting the toe on your vehicle, not camber or caster. But I'm gonna go ahead and adjust the toe, show you how I measure it, and get it dialed in on the front end, and then that should give you a good idea of how this system works. So first we're gonna go ahead and break all of our jam nuts loose. Try not to hit the bar while you're doing this, otherwise you could have a bad time. So once you got your jam nuts loose, you're gonna go ahead and measure outside of the wheel, front to back. So right here we are at, and you do want to be as close to center as possible when you're measuring this. Now I should note that this is measured in inches, not in degrees. If you want to go back and figure out the triangulation degree on everything and do it that way, you can if you really want to know degrees. But for most motorsport stuff, we measure in inches, so like 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/8 of an inch, you know, thousandths of inches, stuff like that. Make sure I got my wheel on straight, because this is towed in. Yeah, so fun fact, if you have a quick release steering wheel, make sure your wheel's on correctly. That way when you straighten it, your actual wheel's straight. So I thought that one looked a little bit far towed out, and the fact that this one was towed in made me think I'm going to put my wheel on crooked, which I did. So I realigned that and straightened the wheel out. So now let's remeasure this. So we are at 1 7/8 in the back. We're at 1 1/2 in the front. No, we're at 1 3/8 in the front. So 1 3/8. So that's what, 1/2 inch toe out. Yeah, so we're at a 1/2 inch out on this wheel right now. So we're gonna want to bring that in about a 1/4 inch, because we want to be around a 1/2 inch total on the front. So I'm gonna go ahead, adjust this in, and then remeasure it. You can kind of see what I'm talking about, how nice it is having those garbage bags, because it makes it really easy to adjust. Oh wow, we might have actually overdone it already. Yep, go back out. 1/2, 3/4. So we're at a 1 1/2 in the front, 1 3/4 in the rear. on our gap, so that means we are a 1/4 inch towed out in the front right now. So that's right where we want to be. I'm going to lock this down and then we're going to go adjust the other side. It's always a good idea to double check your measurement after you lock the jam nuts, because sometimes they can move a little bit, but after locking those down, we were right where we wanted to be with a 1/4 inch toe out on that side. And it's a lot of tiny little fine tuning to get it like absolutely perfect, right where you want it to be. So there's just tons of little back and forth and back and forth. So I'm gonna go ahead and check this one again. All right, so we're dead nuts on with this one now with a 1/4 inch out also. So that gives us half inch out total in the front, which is where I like to be around. It gives really good in-steer feel and nice steering response. Stability is kind of so I mean, any little touch of the wheel and it's going to want to dive, but it makes it really nice and easy to initiate drifts with about a 1/2 inch total toe out in the front. I've ran less, I've ran more, and 1/2 inch is where I seem comfortable with. So I'm going to go ahead, lock these jam nuts down, and good to go on the front. Now when it comes to aligning the rear, it's the exact same process. So you take your measurement from the back to the front, find the difference, find your toe out, toe in. It's really not that complicated. Just always take into consideration if you're adjusting camber and stuff like that too. Sometimes when you adjust camber, your toe is going to change with it. You change your toe, your camber is also going to change. So there can be a lot of little tiny fine tuning that needs to be done when you're doing multiple adjustments like that. Now usually just doing small adjustments to the toe and stuff won't have too much of an effect, but a little bit of an effect can make a big difference. So take your time, take your measurements, and get it dialed in. But this is a really good, cheap, easy way to do at-home alignments. So some cinder blocks, some conduit, some string, a garbage bag, some jack stands. You don't need a hoist. I have a hoist, so it makes it easier. You don't need a hoist. As long as you can get your car up on the cinder blocks, you'll be good to go. And when you're doing this, always make sure you put jack stands under the cars. Just in case the cinder blocks fail or break or something, make sure you have jack stands under the car somewhere. Not supporting it, because you need the weight of the vehicle on the concrete blocks to compress the suspension. But just make sure you have some sort of jack stand or support there that can catch the vehicle in case something happens. Because yeah, it'd be a pretty shit day if one of these concrete blocks failed and you were under it adjusting and it fell on you. So make sure you have a jack stand under your car and just be safe. Anyways, hope this little setup kind of helps somebody out there, makes it easier to get alignments dialed in. But that's going to be it for this one. I got a lot of work left to do. So like the video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel if you're new, follow the builds along, and until the next one, I'll catch you guys later.